Hello, hello. It's been a little while, a few weeks. We've had, myself had a sinus infection, my kids were sick, school vacation, we were all home. It has just been a long stretch, but I am back and I want to share something that's kind of near and dear to my heart. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with our story, but I have 3 kids, which I have shared before. I have an older daughter who is in 3rd grade, and then I have twins that are in 1st grade. And one of the things that is kind of a challenge in our household is that with our twins, they are completely separate identities. They are 2 separate people. However, my son also has some special needs, and doesn't change how we feel about him. It doesn't change anything. It just brings us into this whole new world of being parents with special needs. And I wanted to come on today and share a little bit. It's been on my heart for a while to share. I just haven't really decided what I wanted to share or how I wanted to reach this topic and connect with you guys about it. And then today we had one of those drop-offs at school where there were tears from him about going to school and a lot of frustrations about these changes that are happening, tears from mom afterwards. And I was, just thinking, this is the message. This is the message I want to share today. This is what I wanted to come on and give you some tips. So even if you aren't a parent of special needs, I feel like my 3 tips I'm going to share for you today are things that I am constantly learning and constantly reminding myself, but also are so good for parents in general, and even just for moms. I know a lot of moms, myself included, we have all of this pressure on ourselves to be the best we can be, to do everything right, to have no guilt. It's just so much pressure. So I think these 3 tips are things that can be used for all moms, but I really am going to try and relate them today to that special needs parenting. So before I start, I'll tell you a little about what I mean by special needs. So I am a special ed teacher by trade. That is what I went to school for. I worked for 6 years as a special ed teacher, did 5 years as a preschool teacher, really also using those same skills. And for me, when I first went into my profession, I thought special needs was these kids or students who had very moderate to severe disabilities. The children who have Down syndrome or autism or things like that. And it wasn't until I really was in a classroom and working with students that I realized there is such a wide range of students who have these learning needs, and it's so hard to not think of all kids as having special needs, because they do and you want to individualize, but also to not think this is what my child looks like, they must have special needs, or this is what my child looks like, they don't have special needs. So it's really changed my whole thought process on what it means to have special needs. And I know I keep saying that word over and over again, so bear with me. So for me, one of the hardest things about our journey through this with my son was that a lot of times people would say, well, he doesn't look like he has special needs, or no, he doesn't have autism, or he doesn't have sensory issues, or he's a preschooler, he doesn't have anxiety. Like, all of these things, it was so hard to figure out because he didn't necessarily look like the child you see on all the posters for like the poster child of each disability. So it was a hard journey. It was a hard process. My husband and I knew that he needed more support. We weren't really sure where that support was. Being both teachers, we also weren't sure if we were just projecting these needs on him and maybe he would be fine. It wasn't until we had an amazing kindergarten experience, amazing in that we had a wonderful team, a wonderful teacher, and people that really truly cared about his success, that we had these moments that were challenging for him, and we had such a great team that helped us get him what he needed and also helped us confirm a lot of our own feelings. So without going into the whole diagnosis, because I am truly a believer that it's just a label, it has nothing to change how we treat our son. It's not how I, change how I teach students. It's a label. It helps give us some information, but at the end of the day, the label isn't the child. And to be honest, Jackson has so many letters, per se, added here, there, and everywhere to his name, and diagnosis, and they all just go in one. So it's really hard to just wrap it up in a single thing. But essentially, he is challenged with some sensory integration and issues with sensory and social skills and rigidity, but also that anxiety piece. He's always worried about, is he doing things right? Is something going to happen if he does things wrong? So it's just this huge gamut, and it's exhausting for him, and it's exhausting for us. And if you are a parent, you know how exhausting it is. So without going on forever, because I can go on forever about diagnosis and identity, and someday I will hop on and share some of my tips through that process. But what I really wanted to share today, stemming especially from the challenge I had this morning with drop off, is my top 3 tips to just be a parent of special needs. I wrote them down, so if you keep me looking, it's to keep me on track, because like I said, I could go on forever about this. But the first one is feel all the emotions. I think a lot of times what happens is we want to be so strong for our child, and we want to be the best advocate, and we want to be there for them. But the problem is we're not always feeling all the emotions. And this is something my husband and I have worked on a lot. And just acknowledging it's okay to be really frustrated today that this is how it is. Or it's okay to be sad that this is how it is. But don't forget, also be proud. Like, some days are amazing and you are riding the wave and you're like, yes, we're going to do this. And then the next day it's like you're starting at square one again. And sometimes you never know what happened or what changed it. But don't be afraid to feel all the emotions. The guilt. I hear people say, well, don't feel guilty. Like, that's just going to bring you down. Feel the guilt. I am all about that, because if you don't feel it, you can't move on from it. You can't feel on from the sadness. You can't move on if you don't feel the anger. You can't, have those rough days if you don't acknowledge the good days. Just feel the emotions. Don't feel like you have to be this strong person who has, this hard exterior, because in the end, you're also modeling what you want your child to see and to do, and they're feeling all the emotions. And you're acknowledging it's okay for them to feel the emotions because that's how they're learning. So why is it not okay for you to feel all those emotions? Which kind of leads me into my second one. I mean, there's not a lot of information about that one. Just be okay with it. And that's really hard to do. And it's taking me a long time to get to there. But, I mean, you have to. You have to be okay with feeling all the emotions. And you have to be okay letting your guard down. At the end of the day, you're a human. Your child is a human. And you're learning together. But my second one kind of ties right into it, is don't do it alone. For the longest time, I felt like I had to rely on my educational background and my husband's educational background and research and figure out and, look at some of his behaviors he was doing and some of the challenges he was having and try to figure out like what I could do to advocate and help. But it's exhausting, and you don't have to do that, because you should have a great team, whether it's the school team, your pediatrician, maybe it's an outside therapist. They're there to build a relationship and to build a support system. You, just because you're the parent and, you're advocating and you want what's best for your child, doesn't mean you have to do it all alone. And I think a lot of times this goes along with the feeling all the emotions. You feel like you have to be strong. You have to be that one who has it all together to show everyone, and that's not true. You have to rely on that support. If my husband and I hadn't relied on all of the outside professionals last year and the school professionals, where we are now would be drastically different than where we were. So we have gone through a lot of transition and helping Jackson find the best learning place for him and a learning environment. And had we not trusted other professionals, we would have continued on the same route. And this little boy that is thriving and growing and, navigating conflicts and frustrations with so much more confidence wouldn't have happened if we hadn't put our trust in someone else. And it's hard to do. It is so hard to do. But feel your emotions and don't do it alone. And also, on that same kind of mind frame, don't feel like you have to go on the internet, which we've all done it, and research everything. I have worked with a lot of parents, and I've tried to do it myself. Feel like you get a diagnosis or you get a suggestion or you're having a behavioral problem or something as a challenge, that there's this endless world of the internet. And it's wonderful and it has great things and you can spend forever on it looking for great strategies. But at the end of the day, you're also just going to wear yourself out. Don't feel like you need to spend all that time finding all that information, because you're missing out on time spending with your child, but you're also isolating yourself from that team you've built. So don't do it alone. Don't research until there's no end. There's this fine line between being, confident and empowered with knowledge and just using it and overwhelming yourself. So that brings me to the third and last little tip. I try to keep these short, even though, again, I could go on forever about this as both a teacher and a parent. The third one is trust your gut. So I'm not saying that you're always going to be right when you trust your gut, but if there is something that just feels like it's tugging you somewhere, for us, we were concerned that our son was not enjoying school, and there had to be a reason for it. And for us, we just felt like there was a disconnect between what he was capable of doing academic-wise, and there was also a disconnect between where he was emotionally and developmentally. So there was this big disconnect. And for us, that was this huge piece that we felt in our gut. It wasn't our kid was trying to be challenging. It wasn't that he was avoiding work per se. It was, we knew somewhere there was a disconnect and we had to figure that out. We didn't know what the disconnect was. We didn't say this is what it is and we're trusting our gut and we're going and finding it. We just trusted that we needed a little more guidance. And by being open and honest about how we were feeling, we were able to communicate, work with our team, and we were able to find what that disconnect was. And it was very empowering in that moment for all of us to come to that aha moment together. But had we not trusted our gut and felt like there was a little bit more, we wouldn't have continued to pursue the avenues we did. There are other times where we've trusted our gut and felt like the placement or the strategy wasn't the right fit for him. And we really struggled with that because as teachers, we both feel like we know the teachers have the best interest in our kids' education. They have the best interest in mind. So it was hard to trust our gut and be like, I don't think that's the best fit or the best way, because we do truly appreciate everything that teachers do. We get it. That being said, if you feel like there's something telling you that it might not be a good fit, you are a parent. You know best of all just have an open and honest conversation and say something isn't feeling right to us. And it might be just that you're not familiar enough with the strategy, you're not familiar enough with the routine, you're not sure how to connect it. It could be that it isn't a right fit. But you should be able to trust what your instincts are telling you and what you're feeling, and be able to then have an honest conversation with your team. So that kind of brings me to the end. I don't want to keep you forever. Just my top 3 tips. They came to me today as I was sitting in the car, struggling and kind of processing my own emotions. You know, it's always hard to leave your kid at school when they're crying and telling you they don't like school, which you know isn't true. In that moment, though, they were not a fan. So my top 3 tips, again, I'll just review, is feel all the emotions, all of them, good, bad. The only way you're going to survive and process and, you know, be able to overcome those challenges and obstacles is by doing that. Just feel them, own them, move on. Don't do it alone. Rely on your team, rely on your significant other, rely on your child to tell you what's going on. Just don't feel like you have to be that strong mom or strong parent who has to handle it all. You don't. And then the last thing I could say is just trust your gut. You know your child, you know what's best in your mind. Trust your gut and have open conversations. And at the end of the day, we're all learning as we go. So just remember that. So I'm letting you guys go. Thank you for being patient with me the last few weeks, and thank you for sticking with me. Like I said, if you do not have a child with special needs, these are still great parenting tips that I feel like work for all kids across the board, but I wanted to share it. It was, you know, something that's been on my heart for a while and something that is very important to our household. So looking forward to getting back on with some other tips and strategies for you moms or dads or people at home who are struggling a little now that the new year excitement for resolutions is over. So that is coming up in the next few weeks. And also I have some exciting interviews coming up with some really great local empowering women that I want to share, and I can't wait to share that with you. So thank you for taking the time today, and I will chat with you guys next week.